I'll fully admit I'm not completely recovered from this long weekend we just had at the Illinois legislature. Oh boy, a ton of hours worked. So I imagine a lot of people are still recovering. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop, and we got a lot to unpack from over the past just couple of weeks of legislative action at the Illinois State House. After they wrapped up session, things are all done, at least for the summer. Possibly, could they come back? We shall see. Also depends on what happens in Washington, D.C., but they have their budget, and the governor's going to sign that soon. When exactly he's going to get it on his desk and hold a news conference to talk about what Democrats call a compassionate and socially and fiscally responsible budget, but Republicans say it's more of the same: increased spending, increased taxation, and irresponsible governance. So clearly, you know, there's a pretty deep divide in Illinois when it comes to these policy issues. Democrats have the supermajority in both chambers and the governor's office, so they're able to get things through that Republicans oppose. But what we're going to do today, we're going to look at some of the controversial things that didn't pass the legislature before that midnight deadline, May 31st. That includes, of course, the Homeschool Act. It didn't go anywhere. You have the medical aid in dying measure. Others call it assisted suicide. That also didn't advance. Plus, that transit consolidation measure also not advancing, so we'll tackle all of that. But also, we got to take a look at that measure that did pass both chambers, another measure impacting gun owners in Illinois, and this deals with the Firearm Owner ID Card Review Board and what Democrats say is due process to allow for people who've had suspended or revoked or denied FOID cards the ability to appeal that, while Republicans say it's not really due process and it gives immunity to the FOID Card Review Board. So that did pass, but that's just one of, hundreds of bills that passed. So we'll tackle all of this here with Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, wake up with us each and every weekday morning as we bring you the latest to know here in the land of Lincoln. Get the headlines at thecentersquare.com and find this podcast where you find podcasts. Just search Illinois in Focus.
We wrap up our work for the spring, but we're not going out of business. We'll be back when the world requires us to be back. But for the next weeks or months, the world is safe because the General Assembly is not in session.
That is Senate President Don Harmon Sunday morning at like 2 in the morning talking about how the world is safe because the General Assembly is no longer in session. After they wrapped up a marathon going from 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday all the way to like 2 o'clock in the morning on Sunday, passing hundreds of bills over the past week, and a lot of legislation that we've got to get through. Stuff impacting employers, stuff impacting employees, stuff impacting schools, stuff impacting taxpayers, the highest, largest spending plan in state history. But there's some things they didn't advance that did not make it through the finish line, and that's what we're going to tackle here this morning. Just a couple of days after they adjourn spring session. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. You can wake up with the show each and every weekday morning at 8 o'clock. We go live. You can join the live chat with a pretty lively bunch there. But we focus on what's going on at the Illinois State House. Not a lot of focus on that. I hear more and more from readers and watchers who really appreciate what we do here because we do that deep dive. I get paid to be on the State House grounds to watch what's going on and to bring you the news as a free newswire service, a non-profit newswire service at the Center Square. So it's a way for you to tap in to get easy to understand what's going on at the State House. So I've been doing this for 11 years now, and it's pretty fascinating to see a lot of the similarities from year to year, but also some differences. So let's get to it. They passed over 430 bills over the past several months, if not just the past couple of weeks. So there's a lot of legislation that the governor's going to get on his desk this summer. But stuff that didn't pass. Remember the controversial Homeschool Act? State Representative Tara Costa Howard actually pulling that from consideration back in April. That's after there was massive amounts of opposition against the Homeschool Act. It would have regulated homeschool parents to say you have to notify the state that you're homeschooling your kids, or else the kids could be found truant, and that could open up a whole can of worms for the parents, including possible criminal liability. So there was massive opposition against the Homeschool Act. That never advanced. Something else that also didn't advance, it passed the House, but it didn't get brought up in the Senate, and that was the measure that would have allowed for medically assisted death, meaning assisted suicide. A lot of debate on the House floor about this several days before the end of session when they did pass it on the House floor. Some pretty heart-wrenching stories of people suffering from terminal cancer and wanting to not have the last moments of their lives not be dignified, and they wanted to have control over it. And these really hard stories to hear, and it really does strike your emotion. But the opponents of the medical aid in dying, or medically assisted death, or assisted suicide, included Dr. Bill Howder. He's an emergency room physician and a state legislator, a Republican from Morton, and he shared why he thinks this is just a bad bill.
Illinois deserves better. When we debate this topic, 3 minutes, life, death, suicide, mental health, drug safety, coercion, insurance, medical ethics, right of consciousness, the Medical Practice Act, inequalities in care, all stuffed in a shell bill late Friday with little time for stakeholders to have input in the last few days at the end of session. This process is wrong. I object to this being called a sanitary food preparation bill.
And again, that's something that happens quite a bit. And you've watched this show, you know now about shell bills, where they take a bill that say is about food sanitary prep. It passes one chamber and then is amended in the other chamber to gut and replace it with physician-assisted suicide. It has nothing to do with food safety prep. And then it's sprung upon the legislators within the final days of the legislative action. So that's where Bill Howder's pretty upset about the process of this. And it's not just for this bill. It happens for a lot of bills. But he says people should vote against this. And even, interestingly, making a little bit of a weird joke at the end about how people should skip out on this vote.
Don't give insurance companies another tactic, another tool to pressure patients, to pressure the disabled, the poor, the terminally ill, with no care, with death. I ask the members of this Illinois House, don't pass this bill. Vote no, or don't vote at all. It's the first time a physician will recommend you go out and take a smoke break.
So he says go out and take a smoke break. So this is all happening before the legislative session ends May 31st at midnight. And so it takes simple majorities to get this passed if it has an immediate effective date. That's why that May 31st deadline's there. After that, you have to have super majorities. No longer a simple majority, but super majorities. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So here's what the vote looked like on the big board in the House when this was brought up late in the week last week.
Have all voted a wish?
You could see it, votes counting up.
Ms. Clerk, please take the record.
Almost barely
On this question, there are 63 voting yes, 42 voting no, 2 voting present.
And it passed. So that, again, kind of shows you, it got 61. That's the threshold. And then it got 2 more votes, 63 votes. So it passed the House, but it was never brought up in the Illinois Senate. So it's still just hanging out there in the Senate. And it was actually something on concurrence. So all the Senate had to do was just take it and concur with it. Again, an amendment to a food sanitation bill. Medical assisted suicide. Could it come back up later on this year? Yeah, it could. It could possibly come back up in November. We'll see and watch what happens. But something else that didn't advance was the transit consolidation bill. They've been talking about this for a year and a half. They've held a dozen hearings that have all been like 3 or 4 hour long hearings about the idea of bringing some kind of stability to the transit systems, especially in the northern part of the state where they're facing a $750 million fiscal cliff. They wanted to consolidate all these things, and to pay for the cliff, they were going to tack on a $1.50 tax per retail delivery, which is everything from Amazon to Grubhub and beyond. Here is State Senator Ram Villivalum. The last day of session, hour before the midnight deadline, with the measure saying it's time for this to pass.
It will provide the world-class, safe, reliable, accessible, and integrated public transit system we need for our northeastern Illinois region. It will also, through major reforms and robust transformational funding, it will also ensure that the 54 downstate transit agencies that operate in 95 counties see robust investment to ensure people also in those areas can get from point A to point B.
So obviously it has the consolidation of the transit agencies, which Republicans were worried that didn't give enough say on boards from the suburbs. And then they came to some kinds of agreement on what that would look like. But this bill put together, put on the Senate floor, with an hour left before that midnight deadline of May 31st, and there was pushback. State Senator Andrew Chesney, a Republican from Freeport, pretty upset about the idea of people who don't use mass transit being taxed to pay for mass transit.
And so we asked, do we take care of ourselves? But I don't think my people should be paying for your people's transit. And that's exactly what this bill's going to do. And then I start to dig in a little bit deeper into this bill, and everything you guys say when it comes to food deserts and fighting for working families and fighting for minorities, you guys want to put a tax on prescription deliveries. You guys are going to put a tax on every Amazon package that delivers into our communities. You're going to put a tax on Grubhub and Instacart and all these different taxes. Just tax, tax, tax. And our people are going to wake up in our districts and they're going to be really, really upset. Because we're paying for your dysfunction. We're paying for your problems.
So Chesney saying you're essentially taxing people who have no stake or usership of mass transit. Measure passed the Senate. Again, it was like an hour before that midnight deadline Saturday. Never got called in the House. And while the Senate was wrapping stuff up, the House, after midnight, so it's now June 1st, they tried to bring up a bill after that midnight deadline that dealt with K through 12 suspensions, trying to regulate K through 12 suspensions of kids in schools. And since it's after midnight, the threshold changed, and State Representative Patrick Windhorst on the House floor forced that issue.
Mr. Speaker, inquiry of the chair. What is the vote threshold needed for passage?
I believe for immediate effective date it is 71, and for delayed effective date is 60.
And as it relates to this bill, do you know what will be required for passage?
So the acting speaker at that time, State Representative Jay Hoffman, took about 2 minutes to talk with the parliamentarian to get clarification on now it's past midnight. It's June 1st. It's no longer May 31st. This bill is up for consideration. How many votes does it take? It's going to take that supermajority, 71 votes.
Leader, yes. So my understanding, unbelievably, I was correct. So 71 votes for it to take effect immediately, but it would still pass constitutionally if it got 60 votes, but it would not be effective till the following June 30th. So it would be June 30th of 2026.
Thank you. Will the sponsor yield?
After all that, you're going to ask questions.
Sorry. You know me.
Sponsor yields.
Again, this is at like 12:35 in the morning, Sunday morning, after the May 31st deadline. The vote threshold changes. And I wanted to just show you that because, I mean, the procedures here really do matter, right? And knowing the rules of the General Assembly in each chamber and the vote thresholds and knowing the constitutional requirements for how bills pass and go through the process, it's important because of times like this. So it's after midnight and this vote comes up. How many Democrats are actually in the chamber? Are they able to pass things with super majorities it being after midnight? This bill from Will Davis, you can see here, it's got 68 votes as the votes are trying to come in. Ammons wasn't there. I believe Scheer wasn't there. Doesn't get the supermajority. 69 votes. They needed 2 more. And getting ready to announce the outcome.
Mr. Clerk, please take the record. The gentleman asked for postponed consideration. Postponed consideration is granted.
So it didn't have the number to get a passage. So he moved to have postponed consideration, which means don't take that official tally. I want to wait to do this again later. But they didn't bring that back up. And that was a sign that, hey, they don't have the votes in the Democrats caucus to get things across the finish line. And then the transit bill ultimately stalls and doesn't go anywhere. Before the end of session, the various leaders gave their floor speeches. Here is House Minority Leader Tony McCombie talking about the possibility of negative consequences from policies that Democrats passed in the past month.
The outcomes of this session are well predicted to be disastrous. Speaker, you are on a path that ensures leadership at the highest levels will have many challenges.
So many challenges ahead. The speaker said that the challenges are going to come from Washington, D.C.
You see, none of us here know what the future holds in this volatile environment. But the leaders in this House have been unequivocal that we will not surrender our role in shaping the future. We will be vigilant, we will be compassionate, and if Washington's agenda warrants, yes, we will be back here to continue that effort.
Now, when that is, could it be a month from now? Could it be a special session that's called? Last I checked, they had not yet done the veto.
We wrap.
The veto session schedule. So that should be possibly in October or November. We'll keep you posted on when that is. So they wrap up session the next morning, 10 o'clock in the morning. Governor Pritzker taking questions. And in particular, he took questions about the transit bill not passing.
Yeah.
Would that fall in that category of broad-based taxes?
Well, again, I think, when I think of the broad-based taxes in the state, I think of the largest, sources of tax revenue, and those are income tax, the individual income tax, the corporate income tax, the sales tax. I obviously want to make sure we're lowering, not raising taxes whenever we can. And so, again, I think the decisions that will get made at the working group table over the next bunch of months and that'll get surfaced, I hope we'll get response. I hope Republicans will help. They have not helped so far with, what sources of revenue might help to address the transit challenges that, their communities, the Republicans that live in their areas, the Democrats that live in their communities, need them to step up to the plate too.
So the idea of broad-based taxes, we heard the governor say that he opposes that, he would veto that, but this transit bill didn't come forward all the way, which had what some may consider a broad-based tax of $1.50 per transaction when it comes to retail delivery. So how's that going to move forward is a great question. And then something else that didn't really advance, comprehensive ethics reforms. Proposals include allowing for the governor and other constitutional officers to fundraise for federal office during legislative days outside of Sangamon County, because there is a prohibition of people holding fundraisers, legislators holding fundraisers in Sangamon County or near Sangamon County during legislative calendar days. Proposals out there now that would let the governor or the lieutenant governor who's running for federal office to fundraise around and in Sangamon County if they want to. So that's not really that great of an ethics reform. Other measures would help the Senate president clean up the issues that he's had with election funding and campaign finance. And those aren't necessarily addressing the, guilty verdicts that were handed down for the longest-serving State House Speaker in State House history, Mike Madigan, and all the other corruption that we've seen that federal prosecutors go after. Pritzker says those things are still going to be a focus.
I mean, I think that, once again, ethics hugely important to me. You know, we try to address them whenever we can. We had a very busy session. There were, in fact, discussions with, with the chair of the committee in the House anyway about his ideas for this. So we're going to continue to address it wherever we can. And I don't think you can ever stop talking about how do you make sure that we have a corruption-free and an honest government.
So we're going to see any real ethics changes. It's going to be something on our radar as we continue to track what's happening at the Illinois State House. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. That's what didn't pass. But we've still got 430 some odd bills that we got to talk about throughout the rest of the summer as the governor prepares to sign a lot of this legislation. Whew. Like I said, I think I'm still kind of hungover from a very long weekend of covering legislative session. It might take me a week to fully recuperate. I'm Greg Bishop. Get the headlines in your inbox, thecentersquare.com. Like, subscribe, hit this notification bell here on YouTube to watch Illinois in Focus daily each and every weekday morning. Get news clips and other shows with the Center Square here on YouTube, and get this podcast where you get podcasts.
It improves the FOID card process.
No, that's next segment. Just search Illinois in Focus and you'll find it. The U.S. Supreme Court has essentially said not right now when it comes to taking a case challenging AR-15 bans, as Illinois cases are making their way through the courts. This is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Yesterday, we obviously had the order from the U.S. Supreme Court talking about the Snope case, and in particular how they are not going to take the Snope case at this moment. And we read through the order on the order list that was from Justice Kavanaugh yesterday, and it goes through and talks about how this is an issue and handguns were allowed via previous precedent. Does kind of hint at the semi-automatic handguns and rifles are distinct from automatic firearms such as M16s. That's an issue that was dealt with here in Illinois and the district court considerably. So it goes on to say that here we are. This court should and presumably will address the AR-15 issue soon in the next term or two. So what does that mean? That could be in next year, where we heard from State Rifle Association's Ed Sullivan several months ago about how this could be Illinois' case in particular, could be a 2026 case. But this case that the U.S. Supreme Court denied yesterday was the Maryland case. But looking at the dissent in that decision, you've got Justice Thomas dissenting from that. And I do want to read from this. It says the state of Maryland prohibits AR-15s. This petition presents the question whether this ban is consistent with the Second Amendment. The Fourth Circuit has held that it is, reasoning that AR-15s are not arms protected by the Second Amendment, Bianchi versus Brown. I would grant certs to review this surprising conclusion. Thomas goes on to say the Second Amendment guarantees the right of the people to keep and bear arms. When raising a Second Amendment challenge, an individual has the initial burden of showing that the Second Amendment's plain text covers conduct. Once a challenger makes that showing, the Constitution presumptively protects his conduct, and then the burden shifts to the government to demonstrate that its regulation is consistent with this nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. If the government fails to make that showing, the restriction must be deemed unconstitutional. It is difficult to see how Maryland's categorical prohibition of AR-15s passes muster under this framework. To start, AR-15s are clearly arms under the Second Amendment plain text. In District of Columbia v. Heller, we held that the terms arms in the context covers all weapons of offense or armor of defense. Anything that a man wears for his defense or takes into his hand or useth in wrath to cast or strike another. Thus, the Second Amendment extends prima facie to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding. Goes on to say because AR-15s are arms, the burden shifts to Maryland to show that the banning AR-15s is consistent with this nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. But I am not aware of any historical regulation that could serve as a proper analog. Maryland invokes the historical tradition of prohibiting the carrying of dangerous and unusual weapons. It goes on to say, under this tradition, however, a weapon may not be banned unless it is both dangerous and unusual. So Thomas here is really laying out the arguments that are being made by Second Amendment supporters in these various court cases. Goes on to talk about tens of millions of Americans own AR-15s, and the overwhelming majority of them do so for lawful purposes, including self-defense and target shooting. Goes on to, essentially wrap things up and talk about the Fourth Circuit's case in Maryland and so on. Fourth Circuit's case aired, they said, in their challenges of these various precedents. You can read more of that by going to the U.S. Supreme Court's website and looking at the order list. But here it says, under the plain text, Thomas says, the Second Amendment, the challenger's only burden is to show that AR-15s are bearable arms. And again, a lot there, but one thing that when we reviewed the dominant opinion on this, whether or not to take the case out of Maryland, you had Justice Kavanaugh hint that indeed you've got the cases that are coming through the various appeals court, and he even mentioned the Viramontes case in the appeals court. And this was a case out of Chicago challenging Cook County's ban on semi-automatic firearms. And there yesterday was an order in that case. Just taking a look at the docket here in the Viramontes case v. Cook County et al. This order essentially says that the judgment in the district court is affirmed with costs in accordance with the decision of this court entered on this date. So this is yesterday. The appeals court in the Viramontes case affirming the lower court. So you've got that order issued yesterday after you had the case argued back in November. So after the U.S. Supreme Court said, hey, we're not taking the Maryland case, we're waiting on outcomes from, say, cases like Viramontes in Cook County. So now we have finality in that in the appeals court, final judgment per non-presidential disposition, saying that the lower court is affirmed. And Viramontes was the appellate there, the one appealing a decision in the district court, so it went against him. So that's obviously fresh, that's new, and we'll see if the Viramontes case goes all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court next. It's now able to. So is that going to be a case that challenges Illinois' gun and magazine ban that gets to the U.S. Supreme Court first? Very interesting to see that. But where are we at on the Barnett case? That's the very large case that happened with the district court having a 4-day bench trial in the Southern District of Illinois, where they ultimately had an outcome in favor of the plaintiffs in the case, the people suing the state of Illinois. You had the district judge say that they are unconstitutional laws after going through considerable testimony on the difference between semi-automatic rifles and full auto rifles in the military. A whole bunch of other arguments made back and forth. So I'm trying to find the latest in the Barnett case, as we did have filings go back and forth, but those cases we're still waiting on a argument date, an oral argument date to be given. So the appeals court's still sitting on that. I'm trying to get here. Oh, got to go to the second page of my my list of all the litigation I'm following here. So here's the Barnett case. All right, so we'll get to the latest if there are any other filings here. I'm looking at the court dockets in the appeals court. All the way down, 7-2, file order. The Supreme Court's denying the petition of writ. Oh, that was last year. Wow, and that was July 2nd of last year, if you remember that. So we gotta get updated here on where we're at on the latest in the Barnett case. That was a different appeals court case. And I'm still not going to the second page. Here we go. Second page. We're doing this live. That's what's good about this show. Not on the second page. Come on now. Here we go. Pull that up. Is this the right one? Yes, it is. So, yeah, we don't have any updates. I mean, the last thing we talked about was some amicus briefs that were filed, and you've got another one that was filed just last week from the Brady Center. It's not available yet, but obviously we'll see what we can get on that. So we're still waiting on all of the briefs to be filed in the Barnett case. There hasn't even been a oral argument in the Barnett case. But as we just showed you, the Viramontes case, challenging Cook County and the state of Illinois, that a district judge ruled against Viramontes. The appeals court heard it in November, and now you've got the order from the appeals court essentially siding with the district court's decision. So Viramontes could very well go to the U.S. Supreme Court next, while the Barnett case we're still waiting on. And the Barnett case has that big record of, the difference between consumer semi-automatic rifles and military-grade rifles. All right, so that's where we're at in all the litigation, right? The U.S. Supreme Court denying taking up the Maryland gun ban case, saying there are other cases in appeals courts, including the Viramontes case out of Cook County in Chicago that could come next. And the Viramontes case decided yesterday, siding with the district court's decision that Viramontes is wrong, that the law can be upheld. So that case obviously ripe for the U.S. Supreme Court. The Barnett case from the Southern District, where a district judge found it unconstitutional, in the appeals court, still being briefed, no oral arguments scheduled yet. So that's the latest, at least, when it comes to the litigation. But what about the laws that passed the General Assembly before they adjourned spring session? Obviously, Senate Bill 8, we've talked extensively about that. That's the storage of firearms law. The safe gun storage would require you to lock up your firearms if there's anybody in the home or in the premise that is considered a prohibited person. There's also lost and stolen requirements for you to report within 48 hours. If you don't do that, after several times, you could be held liable and have your FOID card revoked. Well, another measure they passed before the end of session out of both chambers was House Bill 850. This would bring about a variety of changes. It would allow for state police to do certain kinds of tracking for firearms data to help inform them about crime statistics and such. But it would also allow for the Department of Human Services to report Illinois State Police on people who they consider clear and present dangers, which could lead to their FOID card being revoked, suspended, or denied. Well, another measure in House Bill 850 would also allow for the FOID card review board to have a process to which those who had their FOID card, their firearm owner ID card, revoked, suspended, or denied, those individuals could appeal that and get information about why they were denied, why it was revoked and such. And then they could also go to court and try to have their rights restored. Here's Julie Morrison, a Democrat senator from Lake Forest, talking about how the bill is good for public safety. And let's go over here. Fire away.
Improves the FOID card process, providing more due process, more access to records.
So more access to records. You had state senator not too happy about this idea. Here is...
This is a lack of due process.
Neil Anderson.
This is a lack of due process. This is giving state police the ability to take a constitutional right away and then the gun owner having to petition the court to get his right back.
So clearly, Republicans don't see this as due process. Democrats say it improves due process. It actually gives people the ability to appeal. But Republicans in the Second Amendment space say it's not due process because it's an administrative thing that stripped somebody of their rights and without a hearing. And you need a hearing in order to strip somebody of their rights, a hearing that of which the accused is able to face their accuser before their rights are stripped. This is an after-the-fact issue, and it's not really due process. Julie Morrison talking more about what she says is good in this bill that she advanced.
It's critical to preserve the ISP's ability to take immediate administrative action, including the revocation of FOID cards when necessary, while ensuring a transparent process for reviewing and correcting erroneous determinations.
So a lot of back and forth there. And there's another element we didn't talk about that Republican State Senator Terry Bryant highlighted, and it gives immunity to the FOID card review board members to not be held civilly or criminally liable for any decisions they make that could impact somebody's FOID card status.
I just want to be sure that everyone understands before they vote on this. This prohibits ISP and the FOID card review board from being held liable for damages in any civil action arising from the alleged wrongful or improper granting, denying, renewing, revoking, suspending, or failing to grant, deny, renew, revoke, or suspend a firearm owner's identification card. With this bill, we're taking away the ability to have civil litigation against the review board, the FOID review board, and against ISP on all of these FOID issues.
So that did pass both chambers. That's kind of a grab bag of where we're at in the Second Amendment space in the state of Illinois and across the country. Again, brief recap. The U.S. Supreme Court denies taking the challenge against Maryland's gun ban, citing their other cases, including a case out of Cook County challenging gun bans, the Veramontes case. Today, we find out that the Veramontes case is now done in the appeals courts, and that can go to the U.S. Supreme Court, while the state of Illinois continues to pass more gun restrictions. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Appreciate you guys being here each and every weekday morning. Don't forget, you can join the live chats when we go live every weekday morning at 8 o'clock. Program note, I'm off Friday. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, get the headlines in your inbox, thecentersquare.com, and get the podcast where you get podcasts. Illinois in Focus. All right, so all I got for you today, guys. Greatly appreciate it. Like I said, I think I'm still kind of hungover from the weekend of long legislative coverage. Like it was like an 18, 19-hour day or something like that, Saturday into Sunday, and then maybe I got 3 hours of sleep before I had to get up and go to a governor's news conference. Governor's got an event today. He's talking to a Chamber of Commerce. Obviously, there's a lot to unpack from the final hours of legislative session, but hopefully this program keeps you better informed of how things are happening at your state house in the state of Illinois, the land of Lincoln. Have a great rest of your, what's today, Tuesday? I keep feeling like I don't know why, it's Saturday and I still have to work. All right. Have a good Tuesday here in the land of Lincoln. It's Illinois in Focus.